Good evening and welcome to this special Faith Nation on social issues facing America. I'm Jenna Browder.
And from the CBN studio here in Washington, D.C., I'm John Jessup. A global fight over freedom of speech is underway. More countries are passing laws to regulate what's called hate speech and disinformation online.
In America, free speech advocates argue that's part of what the First Amendment was designed to protect. Dale Hurd has the story.
A censorship movement is rising in the world's democracies, whether it's British citizens charged over their social media posts, France's arrest of the owner of the social media platform Telegram, Brazil's shutting down X after Elon Musk refused to comply with censorship restrictions, or Mark Zuckerberg's admission that the Biden White House pressured Facebook and Instagram to censor stories it didn't like.
This anti-free speech movement is the most sophisticated, largest, and global movement we have ever faced.
Legal scholar Jonathan Turley is the author of The Indispensable Right, Free Speech in an Age of Rage.
I think that the problem with free speech is that every generation has to defend it. And this generation has never been more divided because they have been told that free speech is going to hurt them.
A poll this year found nearly 1 in 3 Americans now believe the First Amendment goes too far.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
The freedom to say what the majority doesn't like is the very foundation of a free society. And yet that bedrock freedom is increasingly being tossed aside. An investigation by the Foundation for Freedom Online found documents from Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, that seem to indicate as recently as last year that the agency worked with platforms to censor speech by labeling people posting so-called misinformation as domestic threat actors. The website was then scrubbed from the internet but was found using the Wayback Machine. A CISA spokesman said the agency has never censored anyone and that the material was probably removed because it created a misunderstanding. But CISA is a part of Homeland Security, which tried to create a disinformation czar. Documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act from USAID, a State Department program intended to strengthen democracies overseas, show that the agency encourages other nations to censor social media. In other Western democracies, the censorship situation is even worse. In Great Britain, a nation most Americans used to consider a bastion of democracy, police charge thousands of citizens each year over their social media posts.
Arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network.
What? A British official also threatened to extradite Americans who stir up trouble in the UK through online posts. The European Union no longer has free speech online, according to technology expert Dr. Norman Lewis with the think tank MCC Brussels. Lewis says only speech approved by the EU government is allowed.
What we have operating in Europe is what I call it's a censorship operating system.
Laws like the EU's Digital Services Act force technology companies to remove content Brussels doesn't like.
They want to control the public square. And so, formally speaking, there's free speech. But when you have such vague definitions as hate speech or any of these new, woke ideologies, is all about controlling speech. So you can formally uphold free speech, but in reality, it means that you curb stuff that you don't like.
One EU official threatened Elon Musk over his interview with Donald Trump.
There really is what I call an EU Ministry of Truth. George Orwell would recognize this within a millisecond.
America's First Amendment was written to prevent this kind of censorship. By defending speech the majority finds offensive, insulting, and even verbally abusive. The Supreme Court has said the First Amendment protects the freedom to express the thought that we hate.
Free speech is a natural right. That was how the framers viewed it when they wrote the First Amendment. They believed that free speech was a gift from God, that it belonged to you as a human being. It wasn't granted to you by the government. It's not tolerated by the government. The government has to protect it because it defines you as a human being.
Some say one reason for the recent riots in Britain is that citizens were not allowed to publicly express their frustrations about mass migration without being arrested. Ken Paulson, the former editor-in-chief of USA Today and director of the Free Speech Center at Middle Tennessee State University, says the First Amendment freedom of speech is vital to America's existence.
I believe that we need an environment in which all ideas can be shared, regardless of merit. And unless you are able to speak as you wish, then there is no way we remain rich and strong as a nation.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Up next, deadly police encounters, the role mental illness plays, and what experts recommend to save lives.
Get the How to Believe for Healing collection, including a special exclusive teaching from Gordon Robertson.
For whatever reason, deep within my spirit, I prayed, Lord, how about now? Can I rely on you now?
Gordon's personal stories were honest, they were humble, they were incredibly dramatic.
I felt more hopeful about seeing healing within my own life.
When you read the names of God, you're literally talking about his very essence.
Take this opportunity that God is giving you through these teachings and learn about healing miracles.
The best part for me was when we realized that God chose us and he trusts us.
Receive your exclusive video, workbook, and special teaching when you become a CBN partner. Call or go online today.
Welcome back. A recent study by Johns Hopkins on gun violence shows nearly 1,800 people shot by law enforcement each year from 2015 to 2020, and more than half of those cases were fatal.
As Charlene Aaron reports, people with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed during these encounters. It's why some cities are deploying experts to help. We want to warn you, some of what you're about to see is disturbing.
They don't have nothing but my baby. I don't know what to do.
This is body camera footage of Sonia Massey and police 16 hours before a gunshot ended her life on July 6th. The day before the deadly encounter in her home, Massey's mother, Donna, called 911 to report her daughter was having a mental health episode.
When's the last time you took your medicine? It's written down last night.
During her call, Donna Massey pleaded with police to not hurt her daughter. The next day, Sonia Massey called 911 to report a prowler. Officer Sean Grayson and his partner responded to the call. After searching outside, the officers entered the home, and the situation escalated. That's when Gracie shot Massey in the head, killing her. He faces multiple charges, including murder, and if convicted, faces a sentence of 45 years to life. Her death evokes painful memories and fear among some in the Black community.
A lot of people like that, like, oh, I feel safe when I'm around the police, or it's okay that police are here. But sometimes for us, it's like we never know if we are actually safe.
Therapist Dr. Anita Phillips describes this as collective trauma, which can add to the distrust of police.
I had the opportunity to support a young Black woman who struggles with bipolar disorder, and she was experiencing a severe depressive episode, which had left her struggling with suicidal thoughts. I am on text, on the phone, supporting her, and suggested that maybe it might be bad enough that she needed to call 911. And her response was, as much as my suicidal thoughts are tormenting me right now, I'm probably safer if I don't.
Lisa Daly heads Treatment Advocacy Center, a nonprofit that advocates for those with severe mental illness. She points out the increase in people calling 988, the suicide and crisis hotline, since the new numbers launched in 2022.
There have been something like 10.8 million contacts with that system, which is a massive up, and that's been increasing over time.
According to Daly, police interaction with such callers often turn negative.
The likelihood of a person in a mental health crisis being involved in a fatal law enforcement encounter was 16 times higher than it was for people who were not involved in a mental health crisis at the time that they had a law enforcement interaction. So it is a pretty stunning statistic.
Treatment Advocacy Center also notes that many reaching out to police during a mental health crisis may be experiencing something called anosognosia, also called lack of insight. It's a biological condition that prevents a person from perceiving that they have a mental illness.
It's present in anywhere between about 40% and 50% of individuals that have schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And the important thing to keep in mind in the context of crisis calls is that if a person does not believe that they have an illness, they will respond differently to law enforcement. This particular population is extremely vulnerable when they're in an interaction with law enforcement.
To better understand the problem, Daly's organization has created a specific database to track what she calls preventable tragedies. Research also shows notable racial disparities when it comes to policing and mental health calls.
You do definitely see, there is an increased impact to communities of color for really any kind of law enforcement. A significant factor is like communities of color or marginalized communities may be less likely to get the timely interventions that they need. So they may be in a situation where they're in the community for longer periods of time, not being treated, so that they escalate to crisis. And then once it gets to that crisis point, it's much more likely to result in a really negative outcome.
This, combined with the nation's overall mental health crisis, is leading more cities to enlist skilled health experts for assisting officers in the field. One example is the Support Team Assisted Response Program, also known as STAR, underway in Denver, Colorado. Instead of automatically sending police officers on each 911 call, any request related to mental health distress leads to the dispatch of a paramedic and licensed behavioral health clinician, something that could have meant a different outcome for Massey.
When they get that dispatch, they can go to the scene, trauma-informed care, medical assessment or triage, crisis intervention, de-escalation, transportation as needed, and then connection to different resources or follow-up care.
Despite being able to answer only half of the calls last year due to staffing issues, the program did respond to more than 7,000 calls. Results many believe are still worth expanding across the country. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Are vulnerable teens being preyed on by transgender advocates? Hear the warning from people who say they were victims of pseudoscience. Next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. A gender ideology cult. That's how one author describes the industry that convinces troubled children that changing their gender will solve their problems.
She also documents the enormous regret of some who took irreversible steps to alter their gender. Many of them are warning others not to make the same mistake. CBN's Wendy Griffith reports.
20-year-old Chloe Cole, a self-described former trans kid, is leading the fight to protect children from transgender surgeries. Chloe detransitioned following years of taking puberty blockers and an irreversible double mastectomy at the age of 15.
We need to stop telling 12-year-olds that they were born wrong, that they are right to reject their own bodies and feel uncomfortable with their own skin. We need to stop telling children that puberty is an option, that they can choose what kind of puberty they will go through. My childhood was ruined, along with thousands of detransitioners that I know through our networks. This needs to stop.
So I spoke with a lot of these young people who tried to do the unthinkable to change their gender.
In her new book, Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult, Mary Margaret Olahan writes, many of these young people wanted to find themselves and had no idea of the impact transitioning would have on them.
They were told that the reason that they didn't feel comfortable at school, the reason they didn't have a lot of friends, the reason that they didn't feel special is because they weren't in the right body, and that if they got into this right body, that all of their problems would disappear and they would feel happy and content and fulfilled. And of course, this is a lie.
She contends that what proponents label gender-affirming care is really puberty and hormone blockers, followed by, in many cases, gender-mutilating surgeries in which there is no going back.
A lot of these girls got double mastectomies, which is called top surgery, before they were legal adults. In fact, I've heard of girls who are so mentally ill, as all of these young detransitioners are. They were so mentally ill that when they went in for their double mastectomies, they asked the doctors, how long will it take for them to grow back? Because there's no understanding of what's actually going on here. There's no proper explanations from the doctors about what the ramifications of these procedures are. And so, you know, a lot of these girls go into this thinking that they're going to emerge looking just like a boy with a, you know, perfectly flat chest. But at the end of the day, what they're left with is very gruesome looking scars that lace across their chests that are black. So, you know, these are just very invasive and tragic surgeries.
Mary Margaret, detransitioning is starting to get more attention as more people are telling their stories. Is there a common denominator among the young people who are detransitioning?
I would say yes. And there comes a point where they think, okay, I've done what I was told to do. The doctor said I would be better and be happier after this. And then there's a moment where they realize, wait, I'm not happier. I'm not better. I still have very serious mental health issues. And for a lot of the detransitioners, that's the point where they wake up and realize, if I was lied to about this, what else was I lied to about?
Olahan says although parents share responsibility, they are often faced with a frightening ultimatum by doctors who ask,
would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? And they look the parents in the eyes and they say this, and the parents love their kids. They do not want their child to hurt themselves. And so they trust the doctors and they move forward. And so this is truly a really incredible betrayal by the medical system.
And while these kids are celebrated when they transition, Olahan says those who then try to reverse it can face attacks or rejection.
If a detransitioner speaks up and says, I went through those puberty blockers, I went through the hormones, I got this surgery, and I'm not better. In fact, I'm much worse, and I'm missing body parts, that completely contradicts the narrative that these trans activists are selling, that transitioning is beautiful and brave and wonderful and will only make you happier. And so when detransitioners speak up, they're met with a lot of hate, a lot of vitriol, a lot of bitterness and anger, and they're told that you were never actually transgender and that you're a traitor, all kinds of horrible things. And let's not forget that the detransitioners themselves used to feel very lonely, very awkward. They desperately wanted to fit in. So this is incredibly hard for them when the group that accepted them and told them they were special and brave for being transgender is now saying, get away from us, you're scum.
As for Chloe, her testimony before Congress, along with many others, has helped change the way states look at gender-affirming care. Today, half of all U.S. states ban puberty blockers and surgeries for young people under 18, and more states are expected to follow. Chloe says she and thousands of others have been the victims of one of the biggest medical scams in American history.
I speak to you in the hope that you will have the courage to bring the scandal to an end and ensure that other vulnerable teenagers, children, and young adults don't go through what I went through. Enough children have already been victimized by this barbaric pseudoscience. Please let me be your final warning.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Coming up, homelessness on the rise in the United States. How one community is tackling the issue head on right after this.
Download the CBN News app. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Get the CBN News app today.
Welcome back. In some parts of the country, homelessness is soaring. Some communities like Oklahoma City are experiencing spikes more than twice the national average.
The rise is spurring the local government there to work with dozens of nonprofits and faith organizations to give people a place to live. CBN's Brody Carter reports.
Scary.
So homelessness is scary?
Definitely.
What's the scariest part?
The unknown, not knowing where you're going to get your next meal. Yeah. Where you're going to sleep, who's going to attack you.
Homeless for 3 years, Timothy Gadberry feels like he's fallen through the cracks of a system that's now left him behind.
There's no life to go back to. I feel like I'm a dead man walking.
It affects a staggering number of Americans, with more than 650,000 homeless on any given night.
I have been so hungry, almost in tears, not knowing what I was going to eat.
Homelessness in America is at an all-time high in the last 15 years, surging 12% in just 1 year. Here in Oklahoma City, we're seeing a 28% increase. That's more than twice the national average.
In response, leaders have adopted a housing-first approach, which is seeing success in bigger cities like Dallas and LA. One rehousing initiative aims to put 500 homeless people in open apartment units within 2 years, no strings attached.
It's about a $13 million program. That's for 2 years.
Erica Warren with the Key to Home Partnership works with more than 50 organizations and nonprofits, including Catholic Charities, to find apartments for those in need.
I don't tell my mom about the times where I've seen a guy run up an apartment complex with a gun, or don't tell my mom about the time where I stepped on a used needle, or, you know, things like that. But that is the reality of it, right? People from all creeds, races, walks of life experiencing homelessness together.
While some danger can be involved, Rachel Golden remains committed to changing lives one apartment at a time. She also sees it as a balancing act, trying to keep landlords and service providers on the same page in order to keep the initiative moving forward.
Homeless people experiencing homelessness, whatever term you want to use, are just like you and me. They, like I said, we're 2 or 3 bad paychecks away from being in that situation.
In Oklahoma City, lack of affordable housing has caused rent to skyrocket. The cost of a one-bedroom apartment averages $850 a month, leaving many struggling to make ends meet. Nearly 75% of monthly minimum wage income goes toward rent here. And it's a crisis reaching nationwide. As the Key to Home program marches forward, the goal is not only to reduce homelessness, but to help restore dignity and rebuild lives. Advocates stress that success is measured when people have the support needed to stay housed, stable, and contribute to their communities.
Just be kind. Maybe ask them if they need a hug. Somebody to maybe sit with them, talk to them for a little bit.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want help financially. They want somebody to actually care, genuinely care.
Reporting in Oklahoma City, Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thanks so much for watching this special edition of Faith Nation.
Have a great night.